I just think clearly members have these MRAs. They can utilize the money to communicate the best way they can as long as they comply with the rules. And the rules say you can't send out a mass mailer 90 days before an election, whether it's black and white, one color, two color, four colors, eight color. I yield 1 minute to Mr. Honda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in opposition to the gentleman's amendment.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
The Flake amendment would prevent members from sending mailings that do not use official letterhead. The Committee on House Administration handles franking, not one individual member who has decided that he does not like the mailings of some other members. What the gentleman is trying to prevent is an eligible activity under franking guidelines. I would remind the gentleman that he is now a member of the majority party. He should reach out to his leadership to change the House franking regulations if he has such a problem. I do not believe in a one-man regulatory body, and I certainly do not believe in one member should dictate how another member communicates with his or her constituents. I oppose amendments on the grounds that the gentleman from Arizona is impeding on individual members' choices in how they communicate with their constituents. And like I said before, the Committee on House Administration has all those guidelines, and the guidelines are sometimes even make my jaws a little tight sometimes, but there's a purpose between for the guidelines that they give us, and that is to distinguish between campaign and making sure that there are timelines prior to campaign. So I appreciate his efforts, but I still oppose it.
Gentleman's time has expired.
I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I urge a no vote, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arizona. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chairs, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to. Pursuant to the order of the House today, it is now in order to consider Amendment Number 11, printed in House Report 112-173. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
I have an amendment of the desk designated as number 11.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment Number 11, printed in House Report Number 112-173, offered by Mr. Flake of Arizona.
Pursuant to House Resolution 359, the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Flake, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona.
I thank the chairman. This amendment would prohibit members from purchasing online advertisements that link to a website that is maintained by their MRA. The appropriation bill we fund for the legislative branch, or this appropriation bill will fund the branch through most of the next election cycle. We all know, as I said before, that incumbents tend to have a natural advantage over challengers in elections. 98% of incumbents are typically re-elected, and that's largely due to the benefits that we currently have. We shouldn't try to make those better than they are naturally. Members are allowed to use funds in order to designate and maintain an official website through house.gov. That is perfectly appropriate, and I'm glad we're able to do that. We all have our house.gov websites that we maintain using our funds, and that people should be able to contact their members of Congress. That's the easiest way to contact us at this point. Members are also allowed to maintain various profiles on social networking sites like Facebook, Twitter, Google+, and any of the multiple ones that will still be created in the future. Aside from the salaries and expenses for members, staff, and computers, maintaining a social networking profile doesn't cost anything for the taxpayers. However, some members have been using official funds to pay for ads that link either to their official website or to one of their social networking profiles. I would submit that while it may serve other purposes, by its very nature, purchasing advertising provides a member an opportunity for promotion that facilitates greater name identification. Is not broadening name recognition and identification a classic responsibility of a member's campaign activities? If there is even a chance that taxpayer money on online ads could be viewed by members as promoting themselves for campaign purposes, we should not allow it, especially now that we're in this budget crisis. We shouldn't be allowing members to use their MRA, our taxpayer money, to purchase advertising, to drive people to their official sites or their social networking sites. I reserve the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise?
Claim time in opposition.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, this is similar to the last amendment Members have an MRA. They can spend the money as long as it's under the rules of the House. They can hire staff. They can travel back and forth to their districts. They can send out letters. And now that we have the Internet, you can use the Internet to communicate with your constituents. And we shouldn't prohibit communication from a member to a constituent. Certainly no one believes that you ought to be able to use taxpayers' dollars to buy political advertising. But I think the rules allow a member to notify constituents of a town meeting coming up. They can send out a postcard, can send out a 4-color flyer, can send out a letter on his letterhead. If a member wants to announce that they're seeking applications for appointments to military academies, then they can notify people by mail. They can notify people on the Internet. So I think we have adequate rules and regulations that make sure that we're not abusing the taxpayers' dollars. And remember, these are dollars that are provided to the members, and so when you micromanage how they're going to spend them, it doesn't save any money. It just adds a layer of us telling the members how they can do what they need to do, and that's not our business. So, again, I urge that we defeat this amendment.
The gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
I would simply say in response that we already have lines that we've drawn. We don't allow members simply to advertise out on the Internet like a campaign would. That's paid for by campaign activities, not by taxpayer dollars. Yet this is something that's grown and evolved just over the past couple of years, the ability to buy advertisements that drive people to your website. And so this isn't something we could have foreseen 10 years ago or whatever. It's just evolved, and we need to bring our regulations in line with current technology. And I would submit that buying online advertising to basically increase your name identification should be beyond what our official money should be used for. There are plenty of ways that members can announce town halls or service academy nomination seminars or any other official event that they need to host without buying online advertising with taxpayer dollars. That's what this amendment is about. The gentleman before brought up a point, why don't we just take this kind of thing to the Franking Commission or to the administration of the House and say, let's change the rules rather than doing it here. I can tell you why. Typically, things are, there's a partisan environment against spending or against this or against that you have some kind of debate. But in this case, Republicans and Democrats work together to protect incumbents, because we're all incumbents here. And unless you can let the public know what's going on in a forum like this that you don't get when you just go to the Franking Commission, you're not going to get change. And I can tell you that sending out 4-color glossy brochures, as I mentioned in the last amendment, or here, buying online advertising to direct people to your official site does not pass the smell test or the laugh test outside the Beltway in terms of what taxpayer money should be spent on. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time. I urge adoption of the amendment.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
I'd like to yield 1 minute to Mr. Honda.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this amendment would prevent members from purchasing advertisers that hyperlink to their official websites. It's unclear what the gentleman from Arizona is attempting to do. His amendment seems to sanction the advertisement as long as the link is to a non-official website of a member. But why would a member link an advertisement highlighting official events to his or her Facebook page instead of their House website? This amendment also could make ads more expensive if members have to put more information in the ads rather than linking it to their House website. And so while the gentleman focuses his ire on online advertisement, his amendment actually pertains to all advertisements. It's not clear if this amendment would be interpreted to prevent members from showing their website link on television ads that are used to inform constituents of official events. These advertisements are sanctioned by House administration. There's at least 7 points that we have to follow. And so I would say that this amendment is not clear in its scope and its impact, and it's in contravention of the majority's guidelines on how members can use MRA funding. and I would yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, just finally to say, it was pointed out that technology has advanced, and I think the House has stayed current. In 2009, the rules were modified to make sure that these franking rules, these rules that govern communication, apply to the Internet as well. And so we have adequate safeguards in place, and so we don't need to be micromanaging that. We let the rules of the House prevail. I urge a no vote, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arizona. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee do now rise.
The question is on the motion that the committee rise. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the committee rises.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Speaker, the Committee of the Whole House and the State of the Union, having had under consideration H.R. 2551, directs me to report that it has come to no resolution thereon.
The Chair of the Committee on the Whole House and the State of the Union reports that the committee has had under consideration H.R. 2551 and has come to no resolution thereon. The Chair lays before the House the following personal request.
Leaves of absence requested for Mr. Griffith of Virginia for today, Mr. Tim Bishop of New York until 3:30 p.m. today, and Mr. Ellison of Minnesota for today.
Without objection, the requests are granted. What purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House do now adjourn.
The question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow.
The House today approved changes to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which officially starts today. The final vote was 241 to 173.